Hi, my name is Skylar Church. I am a California real estate broker, but I am also a sales manager at Accredited Real Estate Schools. I have their information posted up there as well as below, so please feel free to check them out. Just know though that they deal specifically with California, but this video encompasses pretty much for any states for the whole throughout the US. So just know this isn't California specific, but Accredited deals specifically with California. So this is going to be how to pass your real estate exam the first time. The ultimate goal you want just to pass it that first time, get it over with so you can start that new career of yours and start making money in real estate. So this is what we're going to talk about. So the preparation before taking that actual exam. So my recommended method. So preparation, that's the most important thing. It's the key to success, especially in passing your real estate exam. If you want tips for during the actual exam, I have another video on that, and that can also be found below. So check that video out if you want tips for during the exam. But we're going to talk about preparing it so that time before you go take it. So making sure you have all the tools, the right tools to make sure that you're able to go pass it. So, okay, this is just one method though. Just know that, this is a really great one, but sometimes it doesn't work for everyone. So always study the way you learn best. So this is just one method. Try it out and see if it works for you, but if you have a different one you like better, always use that one because you know yourself better. So I'm going to kind of do the overview, the breakdown of it real quick, a brief overview. So I heavily believe in the work smarter, not harder method. I want to learn what to know and how to know it, so I want to have the right stuff and learn it the right way so I can go get that license and start my career. So that's what I heavily believe in. And so this is kind of how I've always done it. I've done it for my salesperson. I've used it for my brokers when I've got my degree. This is kind of how I've always studied, and it's worked really well for me. And I've had a lot of people who have used it before that it's been successful with too. So I wanted to kind of share this with you. So what we have is the first thing is you want to submit your paperwork. You want to make sure you get that time rolling for the government or the state agency to make sure that you are getting that time frame so you can go take that exam relatively soon after you've been studying. And then you want to make sure you have the right study material because you can study everything really well, but if it doesn't have much to pertain to your actual exam, then it's not being the most efficient and effective use of your time. And so you want to make sure you have the right material. And then you want to learn the basics. So you want to make sure you have that foundation so you can kind of learn it as a whole. You can see the big picture of it. And then what you can do is then focus on the individual topics and the subjects and really master those topics. And you're able to see exactly where it goes into that picture. And then the other thing is once you've kind of now learned the concepts, you want to apply that information, that knowledge that you've been learning on your practice exams to reinforce it and also gauge how well you're doing on the topics to make sure you are prepared for the actual exam. And then lastly, you want to review, do a huge review, and then you go take that exam and pass it. So this is kind of the overview, the breakdown version of it, but I'm going to give you a little bit more details and tips as well, so stick around for that. So number one, submit the paperwork. So basically, the one thing is it can be very time consuming to get your application approved through the agency to be able to take the exam. So once you've done the education, now you're just waiting for that application to get approved. And sometimes it can be a long time. So you want to get that time started as soon as possible. So make sure to send in that documentation with the applicable fees, paperwork, anything they need so you can get that time going. And then you're also then able to really make use of that time and study for the exam. So that's my biggest thing, is to get that in as soon as possible. This allows you to make sure you're doing it most efficiently. You're not waiting too long and you're never having to keep re-studying it, but you're also not having to rush yourself too. So highly recommend that. Now the biggest thing to it all, and this is kind of where it starts, is you want to make sure you have the right study material. That's the key to it all. So you first need to know your state that you're going into. So for California, for instance, you only have a state exam that has a few national questions incorporated. But if you go to other states, most of them have a national exam and a state exam. So you have to be proficient really well in both of them. But California is a wacky state. So for instance, they have a lot of state specific. So if you were in California, you want to make sure you get the right material that is focusing on mostly just California with a little bit of national. But in other states, you want to make sure that you have a proficient in national as well as state. So making sure you do your research and finding the best material. You might have to invest money into getting the best material, but you know what? It's really worth it, because then you're able to make sure you're studying the right stuff and not having to work harder. You're working smarter this way. That's my thing of looking at it. But you know, any education is always good. But you know, when you're having a goal to get your license, it's sometimes you have to make sure during certain times you need to know certain information, and that's why having the right material, I think, is the best thing to do. You also have to know your exam. So if you are going for your salesperson or your brokers, that's for California, and then a lot of states have broker and then managing brokers. And then, like for instance, in Florida, they have sales associates and brokers. So you just have to know which exam you're going for, and then also the passing score. Is it weighted? That's a huge thing. You have to know if it's weighted, and then also what the topics that they're covering on the exam. So this comes down to getting the right material, to making sure that you're getting the right stuff for your studying time, so you can be the most efficient and effective use of your time. And then, as I always say, you don't want to waste your time studying the wrong material. That's never a good thing. So that just goes back to my work smarter, not harder. But enough of that. Let's go back into, now that you have the material, my biggest recommendation is learning the basics and learning it as a whole. So you can see the whole picture of it. You know where things go. Because what real estate is a really strange thing, because it's very theory for exam purposes, theory driven. So it's kind of like learning a foreign language. So you have to learn the ABCs, the rudimentary basics, the foundation of it, and then you can apply it and learn how things go and build upon it. And so that's my biggest recommendation, is getting that basics. And I have examples to kind of explain what I'm talking about. So this is real estate examples. So if you're watching this and you're not doing it for real estate, skip a little bit ahead. So my first example is estates. And what we have is they're broken down into two parts. We got freehold and then less than freehold, aka leasehold. And you want to first learn what an estate is. And then you're like, okay, now an estate is broken down into two sections. You got freehold, less than freehold. Underneath freehold, you have fee simple, you have life estates, and possibly more. And then you're then able to tell exactly where those goes and how they fit under freehold and fit under estates. But then on the other side of it, you have the less than freehold, where you learn about estate for years, estate from period to period, a periodic tenancy, and then there's tons more, of course. But you're able to see that the less than freehold, these type of estates have possessory rights into the property. So you're able to really tell how it goes. Whereas freehold usually has the whole bundle of rights and everything. So that's just one example. And then you can go on to encumbrances. So you first learn what an encumbrance is, that it limits title. And then you can see, okay, how does it limit title? Does it limit it based on use or based on money, which is a lien? And then you're able to go into the different types of encumbrances. You can go into trust deeds and mortgages. Now, the one thing I will say is 9 of the states in the U.S. use trust deeds. But then you need to know a little bit about mortgages, because trust deeds can always be used to foreclose through the courts, which is like a mortgage. So you need to know that process through a judicial foreclosure. So that's why we have to have the right material. That goes back to the other step to make sure that you're focusing. For instance, if you're in California, where they do a lot on trust deeds, you need to know a lot about trust deeds and a little bit about mortgages. Whereas in other states, you need to know a lot about mortgages and a little bit about trust deeds. So that comes into making sure you have the right material. And then learning, of course, about mechanics liens, special assessments. You're able to tell how that fits into the liens and how that is an encumbrance. And then on the use side of it, you have easements, and then encroachments, CC&Rs, and zoning, and tons more, of course. So those are some examples on the use side of it. But the big thing is, because you know the big picture of an encumbrance and then how it's built on between the two. For instance, you can know, okay, an encroachment is always an encumbrance, but an encumbrance is not always an encroachment, because you're able to see how the tiered system pretty much works and how it's broken down. So that's something to take into consideration for it, and just kind of an idea of it. Now, this idea can be applied to tons of other ones as well. So for instance, with amortization, fully amortized versus partially amortized. So then you got the balloon payments, and then you got the neg ams. So you can kind of see how it all works and how you can learn the picture of it, and then build upon that. The appraisal methods, market data comparison approach, the cost approach, the income approach that uses the capitalization rate, and then you got your contracts, so you can learn how all of those different types of characteristics of a contract can be used. So there's some information on it, but if you want a video that really goes over these type of concepts, we have a video on that as well, so please feel free to check that out. Really great information if you're wanting to prepare and get some information on the type of concepts and kind of how they all work together. So now that you've kind of done the whole overview, you learned the basics, my best recommendation is to now go through each individual topic. This is a really great thing because what I've learned that focused and concentrated studying produces better results, and it really allows you to learn new concepts, and you will have better retention of it because you're mastering certain topics. And it allows you to also make it meaningful. The biggest thing is you want to make sure, because when you're learning each individual things, that you're able to make the differentiation between the concepts. And when you're focusing on one little part of it, you're really able to tell exactly how everything fits into that picture, and then also how they're different. And also what you're able to do is you can make it meaningful, so you can associate it with other things you know to help for better memory. You're then able to visualize it too. I'm a very visual person, so when I learn concepts, I like to see how it all works together. So for instance, like comparison charts and Venn diagrams, stuff like that really helps for me to be able to see where things go. Other people, they like to learn stuff and then they call it explanation, where they teach it to other people. So they're able to see exactly and kind of put in their own words what they've been learning, and it usually helps for better retention as well. So that's a few things. We've even had people who are auditory learners, so sometimes people like to make songs, so they're able to go back to that. Some people even like to do mnemonics, so they're able to kind of get little memory hooks that way. So anything that works best for you. So like for instance, when you're learning about fixtures for becoming real property, Maria, they like to remember as a mnemonic, which is method of attachment, adaptability, relationship, intent, and then agreements. So that's kind of one thing to do, and you can get a ton of different ones like that. So that's something to remember. And then also you want to make sure you work it out and make use of your notes. So you're able to recognize your challenging areas by focusing on certain topics. You can see exactly how well you're doing. I also really recommend highlighting and making notes, using a bunch of different colors if you can, so you're able to really see the difference between the concepts. And then if you have practice questions on those focused topics, that's also a really great tool to have, so you can see how well you're doing on it. Now, after you've focused on the topics, the big thing is you now want to put it all together and reinforce the learning that you've done and apply what you've been learning. So you want to have practice exams, and you really want to study those. So because they will simulate your real estate exam by grabbing questions from all over, so you can kind of see an overall picture of how well you're doing with your topics. And then my biggest thing is I really recommend at least getting an 80% in all topics before even attempting your real estate exam. So making sure you're getting 80% in all of your exams. That's kind of the bare basics of it to make sure that you're proficient. So when you go in there and do it, you have the best possible chance of passing it and getting that license. So study the practice exams, and then any other supplementary material you might have. So for instance, if you're a huge flashcards person and you have flashcards, use those. If you're an auditory learner and you have audio CDs or audio files you can listen to, especially if you're always in the car or you're driving, you can listen to that and you're going to be learning. And then the real estate dictionary. Some people love to have a dictionary. Myself personally, I get bored out of my mind if you give me a dictionary to read. So I prefer if you have the right material. It pretty much teaches you everything and how it works, so you don't need a dictionary, but it's a really great resource to reference to. Some people swear by it. So, if you have a dictionary and it works for you, use it. For real estate, of course. And then the other thing is you want to review it all. So you want to make sure you review everything, but you also put an emphasis on the topics that were challenging or more difficult for you. So you want to have everything so you're as prepared as possible. And then you should be good for that state exam, and you should have lots of luck for it too, because what I like to say is luck is just adequate preparation and the right opportunity. So if you prepare enough and you go in to take that state exam, you should pass it with flying colors because you put the work in ahead of time. Okay, so now you pass your exam, you're all set. So, just breathe, relax, take your time, and just know that if for some reason you don't pass the exam, it's not the end of the world. You can always go back and retake it, and you will learn what your challenging areas were on the exam, so you can use it as constructive, basically tools to make sure that you're prepared for the next time so you can go ace it. But you know what? I say if you put the work in up front, it should reflect in your results, and you should pass it and be able to get that career. and start with real estate. So if you want tips for during the actual exam, please feel free to check out my other video. But just note that this method can be extrapolated to a ton of different other fields and exams you're doing. So the NMLS for your mortgage loan brokering, your notary public, escrow officer, insurance, CPA, if you're in college, or any exam you might possibly have, this type of method could be extrapolated and used and applied for those different types of fields. So I hope this really helps for you. I'm Skylar with Accredited Real Estate Schools. If you want to check them out, please feel free to give them a call or stop them by, send them an email. They are specifically just for California, but this video pretty much is general throughout the whole entire US. So I hope it helps for you, and happy studying.